Terraforming Mars just had its second baby. It's Terraforming Mars Dice. This comes on the heels of Ares Expedition. Now we've got a dice version. We've got two kids. We have to choose our favorite between these two children. Can I do it? It's going to be difficult. First, I'm going to give an overview of what Terraforming Mars Dice brings to the series. Then I'm going to compare and contrast its sibling in Ares Expedition. We're going to figure out what's the best for me, and hopefully it informs the decision for you. It's really tough to pick a favorite child, unless, I mean, some of them it's an easy pick. Let's just be honest. But in order to do so, I've got to dive deep into Terraforming Mars Dice game to see what it does different, and is it enough to justify me keeping it. I'm going to have to give up one of these. I really love Ares Expedition. Is Dice going to do enough new things to warrant the switch? You're going to have to stick around to find out. So the general concept of all the Terraforming Mars is that you and other players are tasked at terraforming the planet so it can be inhabitable by human beings. You may ask, what is terraforming? I didn't know before I looked it up, so I'm going to read it to you. Terraforming literally means earth shaping of a planet, moon, or other body, is the hypothetical process of deliberately modifying its atmosphere, volatile components, temperature, surface, topography, or ecology to be similar to the environment of Earth and make it habitable for Earth life. So that's what's going on in these games, and it's no different here in the dice game. One foundational concept are the terraforming components, or what are called the global parameters. Those parameters are temperature, oxygen, and oceans. If you complete two of those three, the game is over. Everyone takes one more turn and you move on to final scoring. The most points, pretty simply, wins the game. In this game, the way you get there is you build an engine of resources. Those resources come back to you in form of die. Those die are rolled, and those results are used to play cards. Those cards do a variety of different things. The green cards are that engine. They are that constant resource. As you go into production turn, you get those die over and over again to roll. Then there's red cards. Red cards give you a variety of things like points, more of these die to roll immediately. They'll also complete some terraforming elements like placing ocean or forests, cities, increasing temperature, that type of stuff. Then there's the blue cards. These blue cards you intermittently flip to be able to perform special actions, and that brings me to these actions. Each turn you have an option of two different action phases essentially. One is production. Pretty simply, you can swap cards for up to 5 new ones. You're going to be doing this a lot. You also go into the actual production where you gather the die that are on the green cards and also your starting corporation card and re-roll those, and that will be the impetus into the next option, which is an action phase. And when you go into the action phase, you first start with a supporting action that has to be done first. You can't do them in any order that you'd like. And the supporting actions are your luck mitigation, because it allows you to turn in a resource or one of your die for either 2 cards or to flip another one of your die to any face you want. To understand why that's important, we get to go into the main action. First and foremost in the main action, you're going to want to play cards to get that engine up and running, and you do that with these resources. Unlike in Ares Expedition, where the main currency to play cards is MC, that concept is gone. It's a variety of these symbols that you're essentially trying to cash in to get these cards. That makes it a little more difficult. Not only do you have to have the right dice, but you also have to have the right symbols rolled in order to pay to play these cards. I want to put a really big emphasis here. This is a key component of the game, and that mitigation of luck that I had described in that beginning support action is something you're going to be using over and over again to get the right die faces in order to get these cards played. Another option with this main action is going up that temperature track. As we've already discussed, that's one of the parameters that you can max out to end the game. You can trade in 3 of these Celsius symbol faced red die to be able to increase the temperature on your planet. You can turn in 3 of these blue water die to place ocean tiles. These ocean tiles can only be placed in ocean spaces. And one note, as you place tiles on this map, you are getting the bonus underneath. Speaking of placing tiles, you can turn in 4 of these leaf symbols to be able to place a forest. For each adjacent city, you get 1 bonus point. You also get to increase oxygen 1 step, which gives you 2 victory points. And for 3 of these city symbols, you can place a city. You get 2 victory points for placing it. It can't be next to another city, but just like forest being next to the cities, if you place a city next to a forest, you get a bonus point for every forest adjacent. And lastly, you can turn in 3 yellow die with this credit symbol to get 2 points. A couple other side notes on the dice game. There's bonus cards that you can acquire and play immediately. They trigger when you get to certain points on the map. There's also milestones, 3 of them each game. The first player to get them takes them. They call for things like having a certain number of cards in play, producing 1 of each resource type, or having a certain number of points on the victory track. There's also these awards that come in the form of die that you roll at the beginning of the game. You pick 3 random die, you roll them, and for those symbols, you count up the number of them that you have on each card that you've played, and the person with the most scores victory points. You rinse and repeat, and that's basically the game. We're going to compare and contrast Ares Expedition and the dice game a little bit here. So the end game trigger, in Ares Expedition, all 3 global parameters have to be completed, while in the dice game, only 2. For the dice game, this hex map works totally differently. You're placing 4 cities and oceans across this map to gain bonuses, while in Ares Expedition, the map is already filled out with tiles, and as you gain oceans, you simply flip the tile and gain whatever resources underneath it. There's not this concept of placement of tiles next to other tiles to get bonus points. A big difference is how you play the cards. In Ares Expeditions, you do have resources and you have production values that are implemented totally different. But when you play a card, you pay with MC and MC only. Now you have this whole new puzzle around having the right die in order to play the card, and you're having to use those dice mitigation actions in order to do that. You can also get some of those blue cards that allow you to change multiple dice at one time, and those are incredibly powerful. In Ares Expedition, the production value gives you discounts on certain types of cards. The only way to get discounts here are also playing some of those blue cards that will give you discounts on certain color symbol combinations. So it's much more specific. The puzzle is directed elsewhere in the dice game. As I just mentioned with production levels, in the dice game, it's all about playing the green cards. The symbols on the green cards equate to the color die that you get to roll every time you choose the production phase, as opposed to having the cube-based system that produces a certain number of resources each time you select the production action. Speaking of action selection, in my mind, that's a huge win for Ares Expedition. In Ares Expedition, you have cards in hand that you're using to secretly select an action. Your opponent is also selecting an action, and depending on what they choose, you get to do both actions. There's a cool little meta in there where you're trying to anticipate what your opponent wants to do, and maybe you can use that to your advantage and not select the same exact card, so you can get more actions done that are going to benefit yourself. I really like that push and pull and friction in Ares Expedition. It's just not at all here in the dice game. Like I said, in dice game, the puzzle is around luck mitigation and getting the right die at the right time to play the card you want to play. So early on in this game, it feels really tight. Like the die economy relative to the cards that you have in hand to play is hardly ever going to match up, and you hope you have cards in hand that have low resource costs that you only have to manipulate a few die in order to get them. And I think that's a necessary kind of early struggle to fulfill that power fantasy that happens at the end of games when you start to build up power. And that's what happens. You build up production. At the end of the game, you're rolling a giant fistful of die, and that feels really good, and you have a bunch of stuff in front of you. And at that point, you're really able to kind of bully your way through. You're rolling so many die that by happenstance, you should have the right symbols. But I found that that's not always the case. And there's sometimes where I built up this wonderful engine and I have tons of resources and I just don't happen to have the right cards in hand. And of course, you can go back to production, flip through your cards. Like, you're constantly cycling cards in that production phase. I was constantly throwing all 5 cards away, just trying to find something that worked well for the game that I was trying to play. I just found a lot of moments in the game that didn't make it feel like I was building something more powerful. Where in Ares Expedition, it's finite. You need MC to buy cards. And as you build up certain production values on each type of resource, you're then getting discounts on certain types of cards. And if those certain types of cards nest with your strategy, you really feel like you're building something intentionally in the game and you have this sense of accomplishment. I felt random senses of accomplishment in this game. I think this die mechanic is pretty novel and interesting. I just don't know that I felt like I had enough agency as a player to really make a difference out on the board. Because as in all Terraforming Mars games, it just depends on what cards you happen to get in your hand. And I think one really big improvement here would be have a market of cards to choose from. Then at least I would feel like I am building a strategy rather than having a strategy happen to me. And while that's technically also a problem in Ares Expedition, the added randomness of the die and each die having 3 different symbols on it, and you have to have the right symbol to play the right card. It just seems like a lot of things have to come together in order to really feel momentum in this game. And I absolutely had playthroughs where I didn't feel any momentum at all and it felt really grindy, while there were other playthroughs where symbols just came up at the right time and I was able to play the cards I wanted to play, or I happened to get the right cards at the right time. It just felt random. To me, it kind of felt like Terraforming Mars, the slot machine. I imagine myself in Vegas yanking on that thing, and sometimes it pays off and it felt really good when it does, especially when you have that giant fistful of die. And other times you do it and it just doesn't pay off. There's some games where I sit down and play and I build my thing or I build my engine, and it doesn't really matter if I win because I feel like I'm building this. I feel like I have agency. And in this game, I just didn't feel that. For that reason, I think I have to pick Ares Expedition as my favorite child. I really enjoy the action selection mechanism. I like playing that card selection meta against my opponent, and I just like building an engine that I know is going to run, not one that I have to happen to roll the right die to get it to run right. I think this implements Terraforming Mars in a little bit of a different way. I think it simplifies it and streamlines it a little bit. It reduces playtime by about 15 minutes. And simply put, if you like dice rolling and dice mitigation and you don't mind the randomness, then it might be the child that you choose. With that said, I've got a buddy, actually hold on, shameless plug. I have a buddy that owns Evil Machine on Etsy. He makes incredible inserts, and there's an insert for this game. Check it out. I make nothing from it. There's no association other than it's my buddy, and he's another small guy trying to do big things. So go out and support him maybe if you need an insert. Even if it's not just this one, there's some really great ones out there. But anyways, his take on the game is he loves die rolling and he loves die manipulation, and he's totally okay with that randomness. And heck, who knows, he may have had a different experience in his short time playing the game because of the nature of die rolling. You know, you can play a couple games where you're rolling the right stuff at the right time all the time. You can have a run of die rolling that will make a game feel totally different. But with that said, I totally respect that. This game might be the Terraforming Mars Junior that you're looking for, the thing that gives you that experience without all the rules overhead and time spent on the original game. One other point to this is if you're constantly trying to bring new people into the hobby of modern board games, this is probably the entry point for Terraforming Mars. You don't have to think too hard. You're reliant on the die and the cards that are in front of you. But really the decision is if you don't like what you have, are you mitigating it or trying to throw the hand away to get new cards? And it's just fun to roll die. So if I'm trying to bring people into the game, a dice game is actually a really great step in the board game journey. That feel of die in your hand is just fun. So that's it. Ares Expedition is the baby I'm taking home. Is the dice game the one that you're gonna choose? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you made it this far, maybe think about subscribing. I don't know. And on that note, thank you for watching and have a great day.